What's good, guys? Producer T Customs, tcustoms.com, and today I want to bring you a really cool sampling tip for those of you who are sampling in Ableton Live. This is something that I've discussed in one of my step-by-step breakdown videos, but I never went into in-depth and show you exactly how to do it. Something that's very useful. I don't utilize it in every single beat. I don't really need to, but when I need it, it's something very convenient and it helps my workflow, and it's something that I think you guys can definitely benefit from if you're not already familiar with this. And so at this point, again, I'm already assuming that you are slicing your samples in Ableton Live. You're using the Ableton Live drum rack. If you're not familiar with how to do that, or you're not already doing that, I've already created a video on how to slice a sample in Ableton Live, utilizing the warp markers that slice into a drum rack. One thing to keep in mind, by default, the default slice preset within Ableton Live is using the simpler instrument inside of each of the drum cells in the drum rack. And so you can see in this case that this is actually a sampler. And so again, it goes into more detail in that tutorial video if you haven't already seen that, how to set up a custom slice preset to use a sampler, because this particular feature or this particular option is only available for you with inside the Ableton Sampler. So make sure that you got a slice preset that is using an Ableton Sampler, and you guys will be ready to go to use this technique. So first off, I've already played this track for you guys before in a previous video. Maybe you've heard this. If not, I'm just gonna go ahead and play the first 4 bars, and then I'm gonna highlight one section of the track that I really wanna focus on and kind of talk about this particular sampling technique. And so maybe you've experienced this before when you're working on a sample and you've got the tempo kind of about where you want it, and you start, starting to arrange the chops and get the sequence the way you want, and then everything starts to kind of make sense with the tempo, and then maybe you have one sample slice that just doesn't work right, or it cuts off too early, or just doesn't fit the rest of the tempo for your track. Well, that's in those particular cases is when I kind of utilize this particular technique. I want to focus on this slice number 3. It's actually the second slice that plays, the second sample that's triggered in the sequence. And so when I get into these samples, you'll see it's nothing crazy. It's just like when you slice a sample using the warp markers, you slice it in the drum rack, you see all the different regions are selected. Nothing crazy about this. But what you'll notice about slice number 3 is that actually there's a loop region that's enabled here at the top that you don't have on these other samples. And what I've done, again, this is in the Ableton Sampler. When you click on this sample tab at the top, you've got a sustain mode option. And what I've done is I've enabled this third sustain mode. And what that does is whatever region is selected in this loop, whenever it ends, it will play back on itself. So I'll just give you, for instance, I'll just play it and let you hear what it sounds like. Another option, if you put it in just forward motion, it would just keep looping forward on itself. I like to use the reverse because it gives it a more natural kind of feel to transition from the end back to the forward, back to the end. And sometimes you don't have to do this with a full note. You can actually just set this, like, say, on a tail of a sample that's just cutting a little too short. So the sample would start triggering here, and then we'll just loop this last region back on itself. A lot of cool little different things you can do with these loop regions. This is just one for instance. Another thing you might notice is there's actually some static, some vinyl static that's kind of clicking in that sample. And for this particular track, there's not a lot I can do with that. I could do some EQing, but because that particular click is not necessarily on the edge of where this sample is being triggered, it's somewhere in the middle. It makes it a little more hard for me to go in and actually remove that. So you get that little kind of clicking in reverse. But one thing you can do is, if you've got, say, a click in the beginning or the end of your chop, and it's problematic when you enable the sustain mode, one thing you can do is enable this crossfade. And so instead of the sample just stopping abruptly and then start going back in reverse and then just going back, it actually will fade in that beginning and end part, and it makes for a smoother transition when you mix that into your sequence. So because I only had a very short portion of that sample that I wanted to use and extend, I actually set up this sustain mode put it into a looping region, and it kind of makes sense overall in the track. So I just want to bring you guys that cool little sampling trick. Again, this is something that's great if you're using the Ableton Live drum rack, slice your samples, and you're using the sampler inside of your drum rack. Again, the sampler just gives you a lot more flexibility, a lot more control over your samples. It just gives you the maximum amount of options when you're going to create your beats. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. Is this something you want me to expand on? I can give you some other examples of the way I've utilized this same kind of technique. This is just one particular, for instance, of how you can use this sustain mode. So let me know in the comments, guys. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace. Now we can discuss things like Ableton Live strategies and tips, anything specifically you need help with in Ableton Live, general production techniques. So if you need, so maybe something I've covered in one of my videos, or something that you need more in-depth help on as far as your music production is concerned, a little tip or strategy, we can cover that. We can talk about anything from mixing and mastering. I've had a lot of questions over the years about mixing a beat, mixing a hip-hop beat, sampling, how to chop samples and how to get your samples to work together, mixing drums, a variety of different things, anything you've pulled from my YouTube videos.